Today, I'm having what is probably the most non-politically correct conversation and the most thought-provoking conversation with an amazing thought leader in our industry, Carl Winston. He's the founding director of the Payne School of Hospitality, Tourism, and Management at San Diego State University. Enjoy the conversation with Carl. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today, I am absolutely delighted to finally welcome my good friend, Carl Winston. Carl is the founding director of the Payne School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at San Diego State University, SDSU. It's easier to say like that, right? He's a thought leader. He's been volunteering in the industry. He's an actor now for the Caspian Agency. He's been working in China, and he is really one of the leaders when it comes to educating people in our industry and having a view of what's needed and what's going on. So, Carl, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
It is an absolute thrill to be with you, Eric, and I've loved watching the earlier podcasts and I'm kind of honored and flattered that I made the list. So looking forward to conversing with you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for being here. As I always ask 1, 2, 3. I'm going to try to do this podcast in English, so that's going to be better. Let me try again. As I always like to ask my guests, I'd like to know how you get into the industry. What's the story of Carl Winston?
Thanks, Eric. For me, it was a combination of happenstance and hard-headedness. When I was raised by a single mom, and after my dad passed away, when I was a wee lad, she started working as a restaurant cashier, eventually making her way up to manager, and a pretty fine dining restaurant in the San Francisco area. And at the age of 15, I said to her, "Mom, next year I need a car because I'm going to be 16 and I want to drive." She goes, "That's great. Why don't you come work in the restaurant?" Like, that's great. I could be a server and make a lot of money in tips. And she goes, "Yeah, the kitchen's in the back and you'll be washing dishes." And I remember I started that. It was not glamorous. But after a few months of doing that, I remember coming home one night and saying to her, "Mom, I decided that this dishwashing thing is really not for me. I think I want to be a vice president instead. In fact, I want to be a vice president by the time I'm 30. And I don't know why I had the nerve to come up with vice president and 30, because I was the first person in my family to ever go to college, let alone be in a corporate role. Flash forward, I go through high school and I applied to go to this place called Cornell University. And I got turned down. And the only reason I applied to Cornell, I didn't know anything about higher ed, is it was the only hospitality school I'd ever heard of. And I heard it, but it was good. I didn't know why it was good, but I got rejected. And so off I went to community college and started doing studies in hospitality, because it was kind of in my blood, as you know. Once you work in the restaurants or hotels or events, it invades us in some manner. So I was fully invaded, put myself through college that way. So finished my couple of years of community college, and I applied to go to Cornell University as a transfer student. And I got rejected.
Wow.
So I went to the best university I could find at the time. It was down here in San Diego. It's called University of California at San Diego. And I got a degree in sociology and economics, which proved of absolutely no value to me. So after sort of piddling around in restaurants a little bit, I applied to go to grad school at Cornell University. And I actually was accepted. And that really was, for me, a life-changing event, not only because I was first in college, but I was in an Ivy League school. And I had no idea what the secret code of the Ivies were, and the Stanfords of the world, and the great universities, and how it all worked. And I learned so much. I didn't know what I was learning at the time, even when I was there. But it was a stealth learning in networking, in thinking in a very, creative and strategic levels, connecting with great thinking faculty, and so I had a food and beverage kind of orientation all the way through that school. So when it came time to taking a job, Eric, I did what any logical person would do. I said, what jobs pay the most? I'll apply for that.
Mm.
And of course, that was doing hotel financing, which I had absolutely no knowledge of. And feasibility work and appraisal. So I moved to Los Angeles, California from Cornell and worked for 5 years in Los Angeles and then back in San Diego. I did fantastic. I had a great career. I made my way up to the level of manager, and I wasn't even 30 years old.
So you made VP before 30 years old?
I did. That's the next chapter. Well, I'm 27, 28 years old, and I'm already like made it pretty high up in this firm. So I did the only thing I could think to do, which was I quit. and so I ended up working in a hotel company with some of my clients, and basically they said, "What do you know about hotel operations?" I said, "I've been doing accounting and I've worked in restaurants." They said, "Okay, you're now VP of operations."
Nah.
True story. So at that time, we had 13 properties, mostly in the Western U.S. And within 5 years, we grew that company to 125 hotels.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was in charge of operations. So I learned a lot on the job. It was really kind of criminal that some young and experienced guy like me was doing that. One of the things that might surprise even you, my friend, is I was not a nice person back then in any way. I was a hard driving, I'm going to work way more hours than you. If you work for me, you better work your butt off. I was one of those guys who said, if you really want a friend, you should own a pet, but you're not going to get any friendship from me.
Wow.
And what are your results? I was actually trained by the president of the company to ask questions like, hey, if you screwed that up, what else have you screwed up?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. So that company, we went bankrupt, overfinanced ourselves, and I went to work for another hotel company. You've actually heard of it. It's called Trust House Forte. And it's now bankrupt. But I ended up running all their U.S. and Canadian business and did that and really enjoyed it. Was still not the nicest person because I was just too focused on success, and I had material success, but I wasn't very nice to work for. So that company succumbed to a hostile takeover, and I went to work. I got headhunted into, I don't even know if you know this, a theme park company as the chief operating officer, and I ran a chain of small theme parks based out of Boston. So that was weird, and we're almost at the end here. And then that I did not like working for that company at all, and I quit after a couple of years. And I took the second best job I've ever had, and that was I called one of my friends who was back here in California, and I said, "Hey, I want to come back. I'm tired of being the bad guy. I'm tired of being, the give me the results or I'm going to fire you kind of person. So, can I come work for your company?" He says, based on the 20 years I've known you, Carl, yeah, you should come work for me. And so I go out there, and our business was we were repo men. We took over businesses from people, and our customers were all banks. So I was still a bad guy. And but it turned out to be the second best job I ever had because all of our clients were banks, and we grew the business tremendously when I got there. Prior to my arrival, it was just hotels. We expanded into restaurants, gas stations, truck stops, anything that had multi-unit operations. We would get a phone call Monday morning. Hey, we just took over 50 gas stations in Kansas. Can you take them over tomorrow? So I'd get on a plane with my team, and we'd take over 50 gas stations in Kansas tomorrow. I was doing that all over the U.S. and Canada. It was a blast.
What a tremendous experience you gained with all those different fields in which you work.
I really feel it helped me become an expert on business failure.
Wow.
And,
That's your sense of humor. But, in all fairness, all the things you've learned, it's just fascinating and help you get better. But one question I had before we continue on what you're doing and how you start the school and your journey, what made you change as a human being, from being a jerk, as you said, to being the person that I know?
yeah. Thank you for not calling me a jerk anymore. It was a couple of things. I had a couple of bad exits. Getting fired twice was humbling, but eventually I figured out it wasn't me. It was me, not them. I blamed them at the time, and it really took me a very, very long time to look in the mirror and say, "Oh, it was actually me." I always had a lot of power and charisma, but I wasn't using it properly. I was kind of using it for evil. It's a hell of a question, and I think it was just not just being fired a couple of times, but maybe just growing up, Eric, and understanding what's important. At that point, I had a family, and I'm watching my children grow, and I'm traveling, and I'm angry, and I'm not doing the right things, and. I have to say, part of my transition was when I came back to San Diego to work for this company, this repositioning company. I got a call from the people at San Diego State saying, "Hey, we're starting a hospitality school. Can you be on our advisory board?" And this also sort of softened me because it's like, wow, somebody wants my advice, and it's like, how much does it pay? Like, no, you pay us. Like, oh, okay. I learned that when university calls and says, "Hey, you want to be on our board? We want your advice." They also want your money. So I was happy to write the checks and be on their advisory board. And the couple of years I spent helping build the curriculum and the culture with 40 other business people, it continued to soften me. And help me understand the vision of giving back. And that's really ultimately why we're here on the earth as human beings, is not to take, as I was doing for much of my earlier life, but to give. And it fascinated me that the more I gave, not too surprisingly, the more I got.
Yep.
And far more getting back than I was giving away. And whether that was time, treasure, or talent, I gave it away. And when it came to start the school, I was on this committee that helped, do the selection. And I was always saying, this guy can't run it. No, she doesn't know what she's doing. And of course they said, well, if you're so smart, why don't you do it? And so they offered me a 50% pay cut, which I took. And they figured, well,
they haven't found anybody better in the last 20 years or what?
No, I took a pretty big pay cut to do this. So. But it's funny, Eric, you asked, I don't mean this to sound braggy, but the average person who does my job lasts about 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I've been at SDSU 20. And it's not normal, but nor is what we've created. And since then, as you know, I'm very active consulting business and work in the events industry and things like that. But absolute journey to be here. I never thought I'd be here more than 2 years. And you talk about having a change of heart. Working with these students is I liken it to a dopamine reaction. It's like the best thrill of all.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
So it's just been an absolute professional dream come true. I will finish my career out here and doing some other projects, but been the thrill of a lifetime to get the school going.
That's awesome. And also, Carl, I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about how you build the largest school network in China in the industry.
Yeah, I know.
How many students were involved?
We at our peak before COVID, and we shut this down just after COVID hit last year. We had 400 schools with 400,000 students.
400 schools with 400,000 students
in hospitality and event management.
Wow.
Yeah, it was called Wan Li Hao Chong, or for those of you who I don't speak Mandarin either, but I can say this was an initiative funded by the Marriott family through their family foundation that they funded for me about 10 years ago, based on a long-term relationship we've had with the family and the fact that I've been working off and on in China for 20 years as well, and partnered with the Shanghai government. We ended up working in 23 provinces, more than 50 cities. We worked in underserved parts of China, helping the universities there develop their teaching infrastructure, their talent pools, even their methodology. It was a huge need, and we hope as both the COVID and the Chinese-U.S. relations, get tamed, we can go back someday. But some of the best professional years of my life was building this charity. It completely unexpected that I would end up building something so big and crazy in the People's Republic of China. But it happened. And,
so what I like with you, besides your sense of humor, and we always have a great time teasing each other, is that you're really thinking differently, and you're really taking risk, and you also always have somewhat non-traditional thinking on many topics. And so I know one of them is you believe that COVID was the best thing ever for meeting professionals.
It's true, Eric. I do think that. And, it's starting to play out now, but it's still a bit early to prove if I'm wrong or right. So here's my thinking on this topic, Eric. I think it's virtually a worldwide phenomenon that meeting professionals are misunderstood by many of their stakeholders, whether they're the people who buy their services, their boss, the people who are using their services,
their families, their government. Yeah.
Wildly misunderstood. Very unclear career paths. If I say to you, hotel in Great Britain, there's going to be a general manager, a reception manager, or this manager, or that. Hotel in Egypt, same. Hotel in China, same. Meeting professionals, it's done differently across the industry and across the world. Meeting professionals are really, truly undervalued and misunderstood. And I think it goes, and I'll get to the COVID part in just a second. I think one of the reasons we're misunderstood as meeting professionals is anybody can have a meeting. You and I are having a meeting now. Mm-hmm. Anybody can say, hey, let's go in the conference room and talk about this problem. And this is like going to your doctor's office and saying, okay, now when you do the surgery, I want you to use this scalpel. And when you sew me up, I want you to pick this suture here, not that one. I don't like that brand. No, stop. You're doing it wrong. Wake me up from the surgery. Like, I'm going to help you. This is like, I want a Cabernet, and I want a hollow square, and I want balloons. It's like, who's coming up with this advice? And so what COVID has done, obviously it froze our industry. It just froze it. Mm. It was cathartic. Everybody gets unemployed. A bunch of weaker people get washed away. Even some strong people got washed away. But people are finally asking the right question. Why are we meeting? What's the purpose of the meeting? What's the value add of the meeting? Mm-hmm. Could we do the meeting a different way? For the first time in my life, it's like, can we do it differently is an accepted and almost required question. Yeah. Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be live? Is it going to be synchronous or asynchronous? Is it going to be face-to-face? Or, what are the modalities that make the most sense? And yes, we're all finding our ways now through this new sort of world. But as you know, this has been a needed phenomena. And yeah, it's painful. I got it. But I think we're going to emerge as meeting professionals on the other side of COVID much better understood. Our value proposition is going to be much more solid. And people are now trained to say, why are we doing this? They're not saying, we always have an annual meeting. We're just going to do it.
Yeah. I totally resonate with that. it was actually the essence of the book I'd written, with the methodology I developed with Georgiana, as you know, is that I would go when I had my corporate event company in Brussels. I go to a sales director and said, okay, why do you do the sales meeting? He said, oh, we do it every year. Said, oh, my God.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you are one of the inspirations for my thinking about this but we've been always asking these questions for years, but only the really smart people are asking this question. I want the dumb people asking it too.
Right.
Yeah. And they are, because their shareholders are demanding it. Their stakeholders are demanding it. And so finally, we've got the vast majority of people who control meeting spend saying, why are we doing this? Is this the best way to do this? Yeah. So we keep talking about, hey, I want a seat at the table. I'm a meeting professional. I want a, blah, blah, blah seat. Well, like, what did you bring to the table? Like, do you even belong at the table? Maybe you should be in a high chair at the table. If you're not being, you got to bring it to be at this table. And finally, the people at the table want to talk to us. And hey, meeting professionals out there, you better have something to say. Because the door is open now. People are asking the right question. So let's finish.
You realize that a lot of people that maybe lie, but some people are going to be listening to this are going to hate you, and I totally agree with you. So they're going to hate me as well. But thank you for saying that.
You're welcome, Eric. I'm sorry, folks who don't disagree, who disagree with me, but I'm not sorry at all. I'm just speaking what I think is a fact. And the door is open. You've got to come through it now, and you've got to bring value. And we always hear about strategic. What is strategy in meetings? So it's asking these questions.
One other very unconventional point on which you're thinking, which I really like, I think is very interesting, is about what's going on with what you believe AV company. And you say this is a repeat of what we created with the online travel agency 20 years ago.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on that? Explain a little bit why and actually what you recommend as an alternate investment.
Yeah, you bet. So this is for you hoteliers out there, or those of you who have friends who are hoteliers. You are fools. What do I mean by that? I know your podcast numbers just went. That was the worst episode ever.
That's okay. As you know, this podcast is not sponsored. Maybe one day. And I'm a straight talker. That's why we like each other. So go ahead. So hoteliers are fools. Okay.
Don't do what's about to happen. So here's the thing. Hoteliers have been rocked just like everybody else because of COVID. Like you're in default on your mortgage. You have not enough customers, even though you've got some leisure travel the last few months. You're feeling a little bit better, but now business travel sort of stalled out. Group travel all of a sudden was going to start sort of stalling. Maybe it'll be back in a quarter or two or three. And all of a sudden you're realizing, wait, there's this thing called video and digital events and screens, and people can actually meet on Zooms, and we better figure out how to run the so-called hybrid meetings, where we're blending this sort of live thing and this screen thing to different audiences, just like they do at sporting events and music events. They've been doing hybrid for years. The hoteliers I've been talking to for more than a year, including this month, when I say, what is your investment going to be in technology for your hotel so that you can have the capability of, I want to watch the general session from my hotel room.
Yeah.
Where I feel safer. I don't want to be in a room with 500 people. I'll go to the bar tonight because my friends are there, but I want to watch the general session in my hotel room. Set that up. Oh, no, we'll have our audiovisual company do that. And I say, how about make it so they can watch it on their iPad out by your pool? Like, let's have a breakout. Like, anybody, come outside. Let's go to the pool and watch the session on blah, blah, blah technology. Well, we'll need way more bandwidth. Yeah. Oh, we'll just have our AV company do it. They're going to give away all of that money, all that revenue to the AV company because of a revenue share, because they don't want to invest the money. My comparison with the OTAs, the online travel agencies of a generation ago almost now, was I was in the hotel business then. in a big way. And we're like, hey, we need business. There's this Expedia thing and this Priceline thing. Let's just give them all our inventory and create a circular firing squad. And we'll just kill each other. And instead of investing like they do now in brand.com and their own, hotel.com, blah, 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 they gave away so much money. They created these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, which they now have to beg to sell their rooms to. And then they pay them 10, 20+%. We created the hoteliers. I was one of them. I helped you create massive amounts of market capitalization and value for all these online travel companies.
So now you're the hacker who's advising the security company. Is that what it is?
I feel like it. Like, guys, why would you not invest a very small amount of money, 5-6 figures, into your own technology business? Why would you just give it away to some third party? Like, this is just crazy.
So let me play the devil advocate. I think you're making an excellent point. The devil advocate will tell you that, but technology is changing so fast that maintaining the same type of equipment is already obsolete after a few months, that then you need to have people that are full-time on your payroll, and that by working with AV companies, actually they are able to be up to date with technology while having also a variable cost.
So here's why I don't buy your question. As it's what I'm saying is maybe a little different. What I'm saying is, would you buy a new TV every time there's a better TV? No, you buy a TV, it lasts 5 years, 3 years, 7 years, and then you buy a new TV. I'm talking about buying screens and internet access. Some people will use Zoom, some will use Entrado, some will use Hop-in. It doesn't matter what the thing is.
Right.
It's the screen. It's the bandwidth. It's like the uptime guarantees. Most hoteliers don't know anything about uptime guarantees for their internet. Like, if you spend enough money, your internet will never go down. Well, if I have Fortune 500 company in my hotel, what do I want?
Yeah.
Uptime guarantee. Like, I don't want to crash a Fortune 50 company's convention. But they don't even know to buy it. So they're like, we'll just have AV company take care of it. So I don't think you have to be tech savvy. I think you need to have good internet and a good set of screens that can be delivered in a lot of different ways. Let the tech bros come up with the latest virtual platforms, and we'll see who's standing in that. Think of this as what I'm saying is a better TV and better cable channels. Like, that's all we need. And let somebody else do the programming of the show that's on the screen.
Thank you. That's a great point, Carl. Another topic which is also very important that a lot of people are talking about it and on which you have your own take is all the subject about diversity, equality, and inclusion. You said, I'm just going to read just to make sure I'm not mistaken, you're in the Tourism Diversity Matters Board of Directors.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like is your approach of the concept of allyship. So can you tell a little bit more about that? And I know it's a topic that's dear to my heart, very important for a lot of people. And I think both of us also agree that that means also not having selective indignation. But what about this concept of allyship?
Sure. And I kind of been drawn into diversity, equity, and inclusion for decades. And I didn't know how to label myself as an activist in it, but apparently I was, because a lot of people look at me and they've been
come on, you're in California, so you're an activist for sure.
Well, I'll try and encapsulate my thinking in a quick story involving a friend of mine named Peggy Berg, who's about my age, a little bit older. And Peggy called me and said, Carl, I want you to speak on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion with me on a panel to 600 people involved in hospitality. And I said, well, Peggy, I'm a 64-year-old white man, right? And she goes, Carl, I want you talking to the other 64-year-old white men. They don't listen to me.
Interesting.
it is interesting. And I say that story because it sort of informs me about something like if the only people who are sort of passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion are those who are in minorities or underserved classes or gender, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yep.
And so there's this concept that's been emerging. I'm hardly the first to use it, but it's around sort of allyship. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how does an older guy like me become an effective ally? The reality is I'm at the tail end of the baby boom. And the reality about the baby boomers is we're still in control.
Mm. Oh, you think so?
We actually are. Because, some of my colleagues and others, people I know will say, we've had Civil Rights Act for 50, 60 years. We've had, women's reproductive rights have been protected for half a century. Like, we have Title IX, we've got all these things. Why is it taking so long? Why do we still have gender inequality, and why do we still have racial strife? And because people like me are still in charge, and we're not going to lightly change. So when I get into this by allyship, I think it's a very active term. It's not good enough in my book to say, "Oh, you're different than me. I'll be your friend." No, it's an act of what are you going to do to make yourself useful to somebody in one of these groups, and how does that look, and how do you even know? And so I was actually this speech that I was mentioning with Peggy, I did it earlier this year. It caused quite an uproar when I started talking because a lot of the people in the audience were sort of more politically liberal than I might be, and they're sort of like, "What do you mean you baby boomers control everything? Like, that's not true." It's like, actually, it is true. Like, white men in America control most of the institutions. Sorry. It hasn't changed yet. I think when my generation's out of power, it'll change much more quickly. But, and so we started talking about, well, how do you become an ally? And I said, well, the first thing is I have to invite the people around me to be extremely comfortable giving me feedback when I say things like, if I say something inappropriate that I don't think, I think is perfectly fine, like, "You look nice today," or "ladies and gentlemen." Apparently, "ladies and gentlemen" is offensive these days to certain audiences because we have an emerging non-binary movement. And so my team, my coworkers, some of whom are half my age, will grab me and say, "Hey, you got to chill out on that, ladies and gentlemen, man. We got some theys in the audience." Oh, shit. Like, I didn't even think about that. And so one thing, this is to give you an example, I have to invite my team to help me get better at practicing diversity and inclusion. Right. Because if I've got theys on my team, which I literally do, I think it doesn't cost me anything to treat them with some respect. But I can't know it all. And I've been the same way for the last 60 years. So if I don't invite my team to feel really comfortable saying, "Hey, dude, come over here. Like, you can't talk like that." Like, what? Yeah. You said "ladies and gentlemen." Mm-hmm. You left out those three people. Oh. And so it starts with us saying, "Hey, maybe the world is a little bit different," and getting people to give us feedback. I'll give you a terrible example, Eric, but I think it's an important one. It's Governor Cuomo. He said something so outrageous in the paper 2 weeks ago before he left office. He said, regarding his sexual harassment of these dozen staffers and others, he said, "Well, the lines are different than when I was growing up." Right. And my point is, he didn't have people around him telling him the lines had shifted.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not only that. I thought you were going to say something else. Yeah, the line has shifted, but it's about values and education. And I think, to your point, I like the concept of allyship. And if you look, whether it's the civil rights movement or any type of racism, any type of discrimination, if the people that are discriminated remains amongst themselves, nothing's going to happen. They need to reach out and they need to have allyship, absolutely. And I would add two things, and that's a personal view, and I just want to share that with you and ask your opinion. The first one is, on the same token, we should not be afraid to call out people that are behaving in a wrong way or saying stupid things just because they're part of any minority, which is the political correctness part of it, which I hate. And the second thing is, okay, I get your point about ladies and gentlemen, and yes, I want to be respectful, and yes, it's an eye opener, and yes, should welcome the critique and get better. Absolutely. I think also sometimes as an immigrant, a freshly naturalized U.S. citizen, I think that people that are living in America that have not really traveled much have a tendency to quickly criticize America without realizing that it's actually second to none the best country in the world. And yes, a lot of things are not perfect, but quite frankly, you're offended with that. I'd rather be here and be offended than being a woman in Afghanistan.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think it's the American experience is one that can actually invite, to use this one particular example, days into society. The place you immigrated from, there is no non-binary gender. Like the language that you grew up speaking doesn't have this, it's got a male and a female kind of stream, and there's nothing non-binary that exists in that language. So I don't know how, I mean, I agree with you. I think the America that I love is embracing and elastic and can take in a lot of these concepts that other cultures cannot. Just on the allyship thing, I just think it's important for us to have dialogues with one another about our experiences, but also I think DEI has been missing the biggest piece of the audience, which is older white men need to be at the table as equal participants, like not like, oh, let's go help these other poor little people. Like we're all in this together. Like let's have some real meaningful conversations. I'll give you an example, Eric, that I think was so powerful. I went to a microaggression training 2.5-3 years ago here at my university because I wanted to know what's a microaggression. And what I'm going to say I don't agree with, but I think it's important that to maybe reinforce your questions and points was the instructor was saying, well, in microaggression training, it's the aggression is in the eye of the receiver. So she gave this example, and I'm like, what do you mean like this? She said, well, there's a class. In your class, you've got 30 students. The smartest kid in the class is a young black man. Everybody knows it. He's like straight A student. You know, he's always speaking up. He helps the teacher sometimes. Like he's great. And so a white girl leans over to him one day during a lecture of the professor's doing and says, "Do you understand what he's saying?" And greatly offended the black student because he took it as, do you even understand what he's saying? Like, you're not very smart. But in fact, she was saying, you're so
don't
smart.
Understand, do you?
Yeah, will you help me? Like she should, her wording could have been, could you help me understand this? But he was offended.
Interesting.
And I'm like, okay, so the answer is to just have them talk it out, right? She said, no. He's offended. So there's a lot of political correctness in this I don't like because I think we should just talk it out. But it takes the people who have a little more power or powerful positions to have their ears open and their hearts open too to want to have these dialogues. Because I love the word inclusion because it really means like, hey, I actually want you here. You're not just in the room. I want all my stakeholders and all the things I do to feel included.
As Ellen DeGeneres said, I hope one day we can go back at judging the people only by the type of car they drive.
Well, Eric, I don't know how you got that Yugo out of Yugoslavia and imported it here, but I don't think that.
Right? So, Carl, I know we can speak hours, and that's what we do actually when we see each other. But I would not want to finish this conversation without talking about what you do at SDSU and in a more broad basis as well. What would be your advice for people to get more education, continuous education, master? I think that, again, going non-politically correct, we have a tendency in our industry to not invest in ourselves. We have the hosted bio program, we had the familiarization trip, we have the conference. Basically, we paid to come and to attend, and we have some session, fine. But we're not really digging into the principle of managing our own business, understanding finances for our business, and looking at a more broader view.
Yeah, I mean, the whole notion of you asked a lot of questions in there. I have a painful question that I like to ask my students. And I have students ranging from sort of 17, 18 years old to, people mid-career doing a master's degree in meeting and event management who might be in their 40s. And among my favorite questions to ask them is, will you do me a favor? Next time you talk to one of your parents or both of them, will you ask them, what's the last time that you educated yourself on something? And almost inevitably, the answer is, I can't remember. Which I'm like, wait, your parents stopped learning? Wow. Yeah, it's a big wow for me. I'm in a higher ed now. It's my professional identity, but it wasn't, 20 years ago. But I'm just like, I never want to stop learning. I see you learning. I see you teaching at the same time in conference settings and online settings and any way you can consume information. I know you're always learning. And it's sort of that we hear this, be a lifelong learner.
Yep.
I think, my goodness, there's almost an unlimited reasons to do so. But ranging from business competitive advantage to Alzheimer's prevention, literally.
Yep.
And I think, to segue along to your question, I think the other thing that came to my mind as you were asking your series of questions there is the British have a wonderful phrase for what I'm thinking. And it's horses for courses. And I don't mean classes courses. It's the type of race course. There's race horses, there's jumping horses, there's dressage, there's all these different kinds of horses. And, I think one of the things that's wildly misunderstood by most of the public is the differences in the different kinds of schools, certificate programs, CMM, digital event specialists, like, MBA, Ivy League school versus public school, and what's right, and is it a good value? Is it a good investment? If you were to say to me, hey, if I go to NYU and get a degree in sociology for $300,000, is that a good investment? Hell no! Like, who would do that? but if you go to Kansas State and get a degree in hospitality management for, $30,000, good investment. You will have a hell of a payback on that. And so I think it's about getting into those conversations where whoever the learner is, a 17-year-old, a 40-year-old who's stuck in his or her career, the question is, what's the best school environment for me? Is it online? Is it challenging? Is it just I want technical knowledge? And really selecting the kinds of information and delivery that suit you. So, as you know, we started master's degree and we partnered with MPI on it, which we're very proud of. And we have an exclusive partnership to have an MPI endorsed master's program. We very purposely oriented that program, for example, towards working professionals in their 30s and 40s who were stuck. They wanted to move up. They wanted to seize the table. We've had entrepreneurs do it. We've had all kinds of people do it. You and I have some mutual friends who've done it. And we always say, we're the guys to unstuck you. But and furthering to your question, most people don't know the average age of a master's student in the United States is 23.
Oh, wow.
Because think about it. They finish their undergrad. What do? Time for masters.
Uh-huh.
So there's a few programs. We're one of them. Executive MBA is another that have those students in their mid-30s and 40s. It's a much smaller market. But I think for the average person, it's really about figuring out what do you want, and then finding people who can help you work your way through that. I'm a big fan of informational interviewing. And, if you're sitting here in your career and you want to be doing something else in your career, get into a conversation with somebody there and say, I want to be in your place. Like, how do I want to own my own third party. I'm making this up. How did you get there? Listen to their story. Learn what gaps you need to fill in, and then pick your school. Maybe you could do it like with three certificate courses. You don't always have, the answer is not always in a university. It could be through a trade association. It could be self-taught. I think there's a lot of resources out there, but to your point, folks, if you're not continually reinventing yourself and learning, I still am. And I don't just teach, I learn constantly. And I goodness knows that this industry is in the biggest period of change in any of our lives. It will probably be the biggest change.
Absolutely.
So this requires mindset changing, technological prowess, and running at a speed I don't think any of us ever imagined we'd be running. We're like running 100 meter dash speeds for a marathon these days. And, the fortitude, I see people failing because they're like, I can't run this fast anymore. But we have to train differently. And whatever that looks like, it's a brand new day. And I couldn't be more excited about our industry.
Same here. And Carl, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and sharing all those thoughts, very provocative thought, and I think really on point. And as far as the human being, Carl Winston, I don't know who you were at the beginning of your career, but these days I'm really proud to call you a friend, and thank you again for taking the time today.
Yeah, Eric, it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for your kind words. And it's been fun to let me ramble as I did today. So readers, listeners, thanks for being here. Hope I pissed you off.
Carl, thank you so much, my friend, for sharing your ideas. I love talking with you. It's always challenging the traditional line of thought of people and make us think differently and actually act better. So thank you very much again. If you want to connect with me, please go on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group at www.eventbusinessformula.com/group, where we discuss everything related to owning and managing your business in the meetings and event industry. Thank you.